everyone, it's Elaine for Crafting Desert Divas. Thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to be sharing a card using one of the new stamp sets being released in August called Favourite Nut, and I'm just going to be showing you a process video, so let's get started. I've taken a piece of Strathmore Bristol smooth cardstock and I've used the largest oval in the new inside scalloped oval dies set, and I've cut out that scallop using a standard A2 size piece of card. I'm going to go for quite a distressed look today, so I'm using my Victorian velvet distress ink here just to ink up round the outside piece of my card. I am being really careful not to press too hard because those edges are really slim and the card can buckle quite easily, so I'm using some scrap pieces of cardstock to stop my fingers getting into the ink and just being really light-handed in general. Next I'm taking my aged mahogany and just darkening up those edges a little, being really light-handed with my ink blending tool and not being too careful about where I'm putting the ink. I don't really need it to be too well blended. I did want to go to quite a distressed look. So now I'm taking my Perfect Pearls in copper. I'm just putting a little bit of that on my craft mat and adding some water. And then I'm going to be splattering that over that background piece. I find it easiest to tap my paintbrush onto something to get those ink splatters onto the card. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to leave it to dry. And then I'm going to take that inside panel and I'm using the Hill Scene 2 stencil, which is again new for August. And I'm going to take that inside piece and create myself some nice fluffy clouds. And I'm using, again, Victorian velvet distress ink. I think that's my new favourite distress ink for the autumn or fall. I think it's just a pretty colour. So this stencil is amazing. It creates some really big fluffy clouds. There are some inside pieces to this stencil, so I just mask off that with a piece of post-it tape just so I don't get any of those sort of spots in my clouds. So I just sort of flip my stencil around. It has two cloudy sides, but also if you turn the stencil over, you also get like another two variations of the clouds. So I think they look really cool. And now I'm going to just sort of have a play around with my images. I stamp these out onto some copy paper and just deciding how I want my scene to look. I played about for quite some time. Obviously I'm not going to show you all that, but I was there for quite a lot of time working out how I was going to set my scene. So now I've used the Hill Scene 1 stencil, which is again new for August, and they kind of coordinate together. There's a separate video on that which goes into a little bit more detail, but I'm using that stencil to help me create my grounding for my squirrels. So I use the stencil to mark out where I want my path to be and then just use a pencil to mark that onto my cardstock. And you'll see that on the Hill Scene 2 stencil, because it coordinates, so you get your path, and I'm using antique linen just to get some ink onto that card to create my path. And then I shall take the other stencil, Hill Scene 2, and apply some vintage photo through the spots pop stencil. There's two different ones. There's one that looks like cobbles and ones that looks like stones. And I'm using my vintage photo to create a path with stones. So it's really good that these stencils coordinate together, and it makes it so easy to create scenes because I'm not very good at drawing sort of freehand my own scenes. So this is perfect for anyone who's like me, who just needs that little bit of help, and is kind of foolproof as well. So then I take that stencil again, and here's where I mark out that path, and I'm going to create myself some masks. So I just use my scissors to cut that out. And then I lay that piece over my path, and I'm going to use some peeled paint to create myself some grass. Again, I'm being really light-handed. This isn't any speciality cardstock, it's just plain white heavyweight cardstock, so it doesn't always blend the best, which is not really a problem, especially for this card. I didn't need it to be perfect, but I am sort of trying to build up that colour quite slowly. And then I just go in on the other side. And then I just sort of set my seam back up, and then I slip that hill seam or the grounding that I've created for my squirrels underneath the scallop, and then mark where I want to cut. Or I use the die to cut the seam out. And then I just run that through my big shot. And there I have the two pieces, but I don't need that bottom piece. So I just keep this in just to show you my process and how I come to sort of get my scene onto the card. I do play around for quite some time with how I think things look. Maybe I spend a bit too long doing that, but I now start gluing my hill and my path to the cloudy background. And I haven't shown the colouring today, but I will list all of the markers that I use in the description box below, so be sure to check that out if you're interested in the colours that I use. And I will list all of the other products I've used in the card in the description box below, and also on my blog. So I use that scallop just to help me secure and place that background piece, so that everything's going to line up properly and neatly. And then I've glued that scallop down already. I did that off camera, sorry, I didn't film that piece. But then I cut another scallop, and I'm just going to layer that up over the top just to add a little bit of dimension. And here is my squirrel. I decided on just the one squirrel and the Acorn House. I didn't want it to look too cluttered. I wanted the focal to be that Acorn House, and my other squirrel was covering too much of it up, so decided just to have the one squirrel today. And I'm just gluing that down with some Nuvo liquid adhesive. And then I'm going to move on to my sentiment. I did play around a lot with the sentiments. I tried lots of different embossing powders, and I decided on this one. So I'm just taking a piece of Kraft Cardstock in my Misty. I'm using my embossing buddy and using the From Your Favourite Nut sentiment in the set. And then I'm using this peachy shimmery embossing powder and heat setting that. And then once I'm happy with it, I cut it out, and I also round the edges so that they're nice and rounded, and then I add some vintage photo just around the edges of that piece of card. It looked a little bit flat, it needed something, so I thought that distressing around the edge suited the card quite well. And I just pop that up in the corner and secure it with some 1/8 of an inch score tape. I find that really good and strong. And then my card is complete. So thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.